When we talk about the kind of person a narcissistic woman becomes truly obsessed with, we have to start with emotional control, or more precisely, with emotional unavailability to manipulation. A narcissistic woman is highly attuned to emotional reactions. She studies tone, timing, facial expressions, silence. Most people don't realize they are being read in real time, but the individual who remains calm, centered, and internally regulated creates something profoundly disturbing for her: uncertainty. She expects emotions to be pulled, provoked, extracted. Anger, defensiveness, longing, guilt, these reactions reassure her that she still has influence. But when none of those reactions come, when the other person remains steady without being cold, present without being reactive, it triggers a quiet panic. This is where obsession begins, not because she admires strength in a healthy way, but because she cannot locate the lever. From a Jungian perspective, as articulated by Carl Jung, whatever we cannot control or integrate consciously begins to live in the unconscious. The emotionally uncontrollable individual becomes a psychological splinter. She replays conversations, imagines hidden meanings, searches for cracks that aren't there. The calm person becomes a mirror she cannot distort. What's important here is that this calm is not performative. It's not silence as punishment or emotional withdrawal as strategy. It's the byproduct of inner stability. And that's what makes it so threatening, because it can't be faked or forced. The narcissistic woman doesn't obsess over noise. She obsesses over stillness she cannot penetrate. And that leaves us with a simple but uncomfortable truth. The more grounded you become within yourself, the less power anyone else has over you, and the more clearly their own inner chaos is revealed. Another figure who stays lodged in the mind of a narcissistic woman is the person who quietly removes validation, not through confrontation, not through moral speeches, and not through dramatic exits, but through absence of emotional supply. For someone organized around attention and admiration, validation is not a luxury. It is psychological oxygen. When it disappears, the nervous system notices immediately. Most people believe obsession is created by intensity, arguments, passion, dramatic closure. In reality, obsession is created by unfinished emotional loops. When validation is withdrawn without explanation, without bitterness, and without attempts to be understood, the loop remains open. She replays moments searching for reassurance that never arrives. And in that silence, her imagination becomes far more powerful than any words you could have spoken. From a Jungian lens, again articulated by Carl Jung, the ego depends on reflection to maintain coherence. When the mirror is removed, the ego does not grow, it destabilizes. The narcissistic woman relies on others to confirm her self-image. When someone no longer reflects admiration, curiosity, or emotional engagement, it creates a fracture between who she believes she is and what she now experiences. What makes this particularly destabilizing is restraint. Silence delivered with composure is not perceived as rejection. It's perceived as judgment, even when none is intended. The mind fills the gap with meaning. Was it disappointment? Superiority? Indifference? And because narcissism cannot tolerate ambiguity, the unanswered question becomes fixation. This is not about manipulation or punishment. It is about reclaiming your emotional economy. Validation is a form of energy, and where you direct it matters. When you stop offering it reflexively, you stop reinforcing illusions, both in others and in yourself. And that leaves us with a sobering realization. The moment you stop feeding what does not nourish you in return, you don't just regain your power, you reveal who was living on it all along. There is a particular kind of obsession that forms when a narcissistic woman realizes she has been seen, truly seen, and yet nothing is said, no accusations, no exposure campaign, no attempt to convince others. Just quiet awareness paired with continued self-possession. This is deeply unsettling for her, because narcissism depends on the belief that the mask is working. When someone sees behind it and does not react, that belief collapses. Most people assume exposure requires confrontation. In reality, confrontation often strengthens the narcissistic defense. It gives her something to fight, deny, or dramatize. But silent recognition does something far more dangerous. It suggests that the truth is obvious, that no performance is required to see it. And that realization creates shame, not the healthy kind that leads to growth, but the kind that turns inward and festers. From a Jungian perspective, as described by Carl Jung, the persona is the mask we wear to function in society. For narcissistic structures, that mask is not flexible. It is essential for survival. When someone sees the split between the persona and the shadow and continues calmly, it forces an unconscious confrontation. She begins to wonder what else you see, what you might say, what you might never say. This is why she watches, replays, obsessively monitors your tone, your distance, your presence. Your silence becomes louder than words because it implies judgment without accusation. And judgment without argument cannot be defeated. What matters here is integrity. You are not withholding truth as a tactic. You are simply refusing to participate in illusion. You live clearly, speak when necessary, and let reality do the revealing. That clarity becomes a mirror she cannot shatter, and this leads to a powerful truth worth carrying with you. When you stop explaining what you can already see clearly, you reclaim your authority, and those built on deception feel it immediately. Another figure who lingers in the mind of a narcissistic woman is the person whose identity cannot be absorbed. Narcissism, at its core, lacks a stable center. Instead of a rooted sense of self, there is constant mirroring, borrowing traits, values, language, even ambitions from those nearby. This is why people often feel initially seen or understood by her. In reality, she is studying what to replicate. But when she encounters someone with a clearly defined inner structure, values that don't shift, goals that aren't performative, a personality that doesn't bend for approval, something breaks in the pattern. She cannot copy what is internally generated. She cannot merge with what is self-sustaining, and that inability becomes obsession. From a Jungian view, articulated by Carl Jung, individuation is the process of becoming a whole integrated self. The narcissistic personality resists this process, relying instead on external reflection to feel real. When she meets someone who has already begun or completed that inner work, it exposes her own fragmentation. Your coherence becomes a silent accusation. What unsettles her most is not your independence, but your non-reactivity to her attempts at absorption. She may adopt your interests, echo your language, or align herself with your values, expecting resonance. When you remain unchanged, curious but unmoved, it creates a sense of invisibility for her. She cannot locate herself inside you. This is why she watches from a distance, studies, compares, and revisits memories. Your identity represents something she cannot manufacture, continuity. You exist the same in private as you do in public, and that consistency cannot be exploited. And here is the reflection worth keeping. When you invest in becoming someone, rather than being admired by someone, you make yourself impossible to consume, and unforgettable to those who try. There is a particular rupture that occurs when a narcissistic woman encounters someone who chooses self-respect over her. Not anger, not revenge, simply a quiet, immovable boundary. For narcissistic psychology, this is one of the most destabilizing experiences possible, because it challenges the core belief that she is the ultimate point of value. When someone steps back and says, through action rather than words, this costs me too much, it is not received as a preference. It is experienced as a threat to identity. Narcissism is structured around hierarchy. There is an unspoken assumption of superiority. of being the one others orbit around. When a person refuses to abandon their standards, refuses to bargain their dignity for approval, it collapses that hierarchy. What makes this moment so haunting is that it does not come with drama. There is no emotional collapse to exploit, no argument to twist, just a decision made from inner alignment. From a Jungian perspective, as articulated by Carl Jung, the ego reacts defensively when confronted with material that threatens its self-image. Boundaries function as mirrors. They reflect not hostility, but limitation. And limitation is intolerable to a narcissistic structure because it implies equality, or worse, inferiority. This is why she may attempt to re-engage later, often framed as nostalgia, insight, or sudden vulnerability. What she is really testing is whether your boundary was real or emotional, whether your self-respect was situational or structural. If it was structural, the obsession deepens, because it confirms something she cannot undo. Choosing self-respect does not make you cold. It makes you clear, and clarity is devastating to those who rely on confusion to maintain control. So here is the thought to leave with you. The moment you stop negotiating your worth for connection, you don't just change the relationship, you change who can stay in you, our life at all. The deepest and most enduring obsession forms when a narcissistic woman realizes that someone has truly moved on, not emotionally detached as a tactic, not suppressing feelings while secretly watching from a distance, but genuinely reoriented toward a life that no longer includes her as a reference point. This is not abandonment in the ordinary sense. It is erasure from the inner narrative, and for narcissistic psychology, that is far more threatening than loss. Narcissism depends on centrality. Even conflict, resentment, or longing confirm relevance. As long as she exists in your emotional field, she still matters. But when she senses that she has become psychologically peripheral, something fundamental collapses. There is no role left to play, no audience to perform for, no reaction to provoke. What remains is an encounter with emptiness. From a Jungian perspective, articulated by Carl Jung, the ego requires continuity to sustain itself. When a significant other withdraws attention completely and authentically, it disrupts that continuity. The narcissistic woman is left confronting not your absence, but her own lack of inner substance. This is why she may resurface long after the connection has ended, often indirectly, testing whether she still exists in your psyche. What makes genuine moving on so powerful is that it cannot be reversed. There is no leverage, no unresolved tension, no emotional hooks left behind. Your life is no longer shaped in reaction to her, and that independence becomes irreversible proof of her irrelevance. This is not about punishing or devaluing another person. It is about choosing growth over fixation. When you move forward without carrying old narratives, you don't just heal, you transcend the psychological dynamic entirely. And here is the final reflection worth holding on to. When you stop looking back, you don't just close a chapter. You step into an identity that no longer needs one.